What should you expect from the Carolina Panthers in the final 7 weeks of the season? I'll tell you right here on Locked On Panthers.
You are Locked On Panthers, your daily Carolina Panthers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, as always, Julian Council, talking Carolina Panthers with you every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. Your team every day. That's our motto here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Thanks for watching the show here on YouTube and listening wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. Be sure to follow me, Julian Council, on Twitter at Julian Council. We're on Wednesdays throughout the entirety of the regular season. I'm right here on the show answering your weekly Wednesday mailbag questions. All you got to do is either at me or DM me over on Twitter at Julian Council to get your questions in for this week's edition of the weekly Wednesday mailbag right here on Locked On Panthers. Today's episode of Locked On Panthers is brought to you by Hillsdale College. Go right now to hillsdale.edu/lockedon to enroll. There's no cost and it's easy to get started. On today's show, we're going to have Mike Kaye of the Charlotte Observer to break down the first 10 weeks of the Carolina Panthers season and where they're headed in the final 7 weeks of the year. Will Bryce Young continue to be the starter, or will it be Andy Dalton? What to expect from Jonathon Brooks, and will we see a defensive turnaround in its last couple of weeks of the season? And even some talk about the offensive line and looking ahead to the offseason as Panthers sit here at 3-7 with the Chiefs coming to town on Sunday. So here in just a moment, Mike Kaye from the Charlotte Observer. Back here on Locked On Panthers, and as promised, the venerable reporter from the Charlotte Observer, Mike Kaye. Follow him on Twitter at Mike_E_KAYE. Mike, are you going over to Blue Sky? I see everybody's going to Blue Sky now. Do we need to give you your Blue Sky account also?
Yeah, it's the same as my Threads, which is Mike Kaye Football, as opposed to Mike Kaye Baseball or Mike Kaye Hockey or all the other sports that have Mike Kaye's. But yeah, I just signed up today. I just want to give everybody the opportunity, if they have a preference, to kind of enjoy or dismay at my coverage.
I don't know whether I'm actually going to use this site, because I actually also did sign up today, and I just didn't want someone going over there and taking my name. I just want to have at Julian Council. I take great pride in actually having my name in all my social media accounts, so I had to go get it before someone else did. Am I going to use it? Probably not. Either way, follow me on Blue Sky and on X or Twitter, what the hell you want to call it, at Julian Council. All right, Mike, Panthers sitting in the bye week at 3-7. The vibes, they're high after 2 wins against the Saints and the Giants, 2 teams that aren't great, but Carolina hasn't been great so far this season. How are you feeling about them after what we've seen through the first 10 games, especially the last 2 weeks?
Well, I think it's important to keep perspective. As you mentioned, the Saints and the Giants are bottom dwellers. I mean, I think the Panthers are on the rise, but on the rise at a gradual state. I think there's some, you and I have talked about this 100 times. We talked about it a bunch in Munich. Like, culture's cool and everything, but unless you see culture create progress, it doesn't matter. It's just good vibes, right? And so I think when you look at the way the rookie class is developed, when you look at the way the guys that Morgan signed in the offseason have kind of progressed over the last 2 weeks, and you're starting to see guys come together, they're tackling better. Yeah, they're not playing the run much better, but they are tackling better.
Yeah.
I think that speaks to them coming together. I mean, listen, they were crawling out of the abyss. Last year was like the worst of worst situations, and there was only one way to go but up. And I think what's happened is the team has responded not only to Bryce Young's benching, but Deontay Johnson's trade in extremely proper ways, right? Like, they could have taken Bryce just being benched and then Andy Dalton faltering after Las Vegas and just been like, we're just not a good team. They could have taken the Deontay trade as, oh, okay, we're bottoming out, we're tanking. And then they go and win 2 straight games. So, like, I think there's perspective there, and it goes beyond the X's and O's. I do think the play calling still needs a lot of work offensively. I still think the situational operation needs work, but I do think they're taking gradual steps.
Yeah, and I've had a lot of people just ask me this week, do you think this is them making that turnaround? It's like, possibly you get wins against two teams that are at the same caliber as you, and you're able to win those. And that's positive that for the first time since 2022, they have back-to-back wins. And when you really look at it, first time since 21, where they had back-to-back wins and back-to-back weeks of the season, which just illustrates how bad this team has been over the last couple of years. But there's something to try and believe in. Now, when you look at how Leggett and Coker and Sanders and that rookie class, Jordan Wallace is one on the defensive side of the ball, have really developed so far this season. But I think it all comes down to what's the quarterback situation going to be heading to 2025. And they got 7 more games to figure it out. I think they should have 7 more games of Bryce Young trying to figure it out and show whether he should get another opportunity in 2025. Dave Canales refuses to at least let us know who's going to be the quarterback for the Chiefs game. I can understand that. It's a bye week. There's no reason to announce it right away. But at some point in time, you would think that just for the locker room and for the two guys in that quarterback room's sake, he would just come out and say, this is what we're going to do for the final 7 weeks of the season. How do you see things playing out there and just how he's gone about it over the last 3 weeks since Andy had that thumb injury?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a difficult situation because, for a guy to be Wally pipped from an injury on the field is one thing. It's another thing when he has like a freak accident with his kids on the drive home from school. And I think, look, Andy's healthy. I saw him throw 60-yard bombs after the Saints game, after playing with his kids and stuff. I don't think they're in a situation where they can really pivot off the bye. Like, I do think it's the best of both worlds. If you don't believe in Bryce Young, well, they're about to play the Chiefs. And so either you're going to be proved right or you're going to be proved wrong in a good way, right? And so I think I don't think there's any other choice. I don't think they had a choice really going into Munich either. I think he's developing a strong chemistry with the 2 young wide receivers. I think that's important. He's developing a chemistry with the young tight end. And I think if this is about development, then you kind of got to go with it. It's a raw deal for Andy Dalton, but he never thought he was going to start anyway. So I think they were right to bench Bryce Young. I think they proved that with how the Las Vegas stuff went and how he's responded to it. But I also think they're right to stick with him if they do stick with him. I just don't know what let me ask you this. 2 wins with Bryce in the next 7 games versus 3 with Andy Dalton. What's the difference? Right?
Not much. And Andy is not going to be a part of the Panthers next year. And Bryce, and I think betting on things right now, Bryce is probably not going to be a Carolina Panther right now. Just what we've seen from him in 5 starts so far this season and even going back to last year. But you at least have to give it more of a chance considering all that they gave up for him. And I didn't really like the benching, and I agree with you. And I've said it up here, the way the team played against Las Vegas, especially Andy Dalton, and even how they played against Cincinnati, really justified it. And the way that Bryce has responded and performed recently also justifies it. But you look at the passing numbers, and this is one thing I look at, because Dave was saying on Monday how they can certainly improve in that area. Like Andy has more passing yards than Bryce, more passing touchdowns than Bryce. You look at things like QBR and passer rating. He's far above Bryce in those categories. And then Bryce is up towards the bottom of the league. Understanding that 2 hellacious games to start the season, I could see it if he wants to improve the passing offense going back there, but that just spells that they're done with him. And I just don't think it makes sense with 7 games remaining to go out there and do it unless you see him play so terrible against Kansas City that they need to move on. But then you're 3-8 and the season's already over anyway. So,
and the Chiefs are undefeated and a juggernaut and the defending champion. Like, to me, I think you bring up a really interesting point in like giving it more time and kind of letting it fall as they may. Like, there are coaches with hubris who evaluated Bryce Young who probably still see something there. And I think having him preserved on the bench doesn't necessarily entice anyone. At least he's getting game experience, right? And so I think with Bryce, the numbers aren't great. And listen, like, I don't want to say they're playing with house money because they've already won more games than they did all of last year. The bar was very low. But I think when you look at the rest of the schedule, I think Dallas is a winnable game. I think they could split with Tampa.
Yes.
if they can get to 6 wins, which is what I predicted before the season, obviously not the same way it's gone. Although I did say the Giants from the jump, I thought the Giants in Munich was going to be a win.
Okay.
I do think there's if they can steal one, right? Like they haven't stolen one yet. They beat 2 bad teams. They've beaten 3 bad teams. If they can steal one, they play Philly, they play Tampa.
Arizona at home would be the one.
Arizona would be.
It's that's not a team that anybody's looking at. Is like, oh yeah, Cardinals are really good, but like they lead the division right now. And I think San Francisco probably wins it, but they are able to beat Arizona. Like that's a quality win, especially at the point in time in the season would it be where there'd be 2 weeks remaining after that, and the Cardinals could ill afford to drop that game. Like that's the one I look at as because I don't think they're beating Philly. I don't think they're beating Kansas City, even though Kansas City may allow them to be in the game the way they've gone about their season so far. But yeah, I mean, 7 more weeks to figure it out with Bryce, and then make a decision after that. I felt like going into it as a 3-year proposition. It does not seem like a lot of teams in the NFL nowadays want to wait. I didn't love the way the Anthony Richardson situation played out in Indianapolis. Like I get the whole tapping out, maybe for the locker room's sake, like benching him just for like a game or something. But if they really felt like he was going to be better behind Joe Flacco, and they've already gone back, so these organizations, they just got to make decisions and figure out what the hell to do. But that's enough of the quarterback talk. What's pause? Come back. Jonathon Brooks is coming back. He's gonna make his debut at least, and we'll talk about some expectations. I have a lot of people already saying, "Is this Smash and Dash 2.0?" Let's let them play a game first. So we'll talk more about that here with Mike Kaye on Locked On Panthers in just a moment. Time is our most precious commodity, so don't waste it scrolling through the same mind-numbing content for hours and hours. How can you spend it wisely to improve yourself? Our sponsor, Hillsdale College, is offering more than 40 free, that's right, free online courses. Here are just a few of the courses available. Constitution 101, the meaning and history of the Constitution, Introduction to Free Market Economics, The Great American Story, A Land of Hope, The Rise and Fall of the Roman Republic. All of Hillsdale's courses are self-paced, so you can start whenever and tune in wherever. Plus, you can go deeper with readings, quizzes, discussions, or just enjoy the lectures. Go right now to hillsdale.edu/lockedon to enroll. There's no cost, and it's easy to get started. That's hillsdale.edu/lockedon to register. hillsdale.edu/lockedon. You can now win up 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. Prize Picks is the best way to get action on sports in over 30 states, including California, Florida, Georgia, Texas, and North Carolina. Sorry, South Carolina. Don't have Prize Picks for you just yet. Sign up today and get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Prize Picks is the best way to win real money this football season. Which players are going off, which ones aren't. Make your picks in less than 60 seconds and turn your sports opinions into real money all season long on Prize Picks. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL and get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game. All right, back here with Mike Kaye of the Charlotte Observer. Go subscribe to your local paper. I saw it was only 2 cents for the first 2 months, the latest deal I saw. Maybe it was $1. I don't know, but that's pretty cheap, y'all. And there's about 7 weeks left in the season. That's 2 months. So go out there, check out all of his reporting. Alex Zeitlo, Scott Fowler, and a great team over there. And if you want to get some Hornets coverage too from Rod Boone, go ahead and do it. Follow him on Twitter at Mike_E_KAYE. And over on Blue Sky at Mike K Football. All right, Mike, football. It's happening for Jonathon Brooks next week here in Charlotte as he's going to finally make his debut. A lot of fans are excited to see what he can do in the backfield with Chuba Hubbard. What do you think are realistic expectations for a rookie who's never played an NFL game and has not played in a football game since last November when he tore his ACL at Texas?
I think you're going to see his role be pretty comparable to what Miles Sanders has done over the first 10 weeks of the season. Miles coming into this past game was averaging 19 snaps and 6 touches per game. So that's including runs and catches. I think they have to be very purposeful here. To me, to compare him to another Texas back in Jamal Charles, he's not as fast, whatever. But when Jamal Charles was starting out, he was kind of that third down, change of pace, speed guy, home run threat. I think that's the way they need to look at Jonathon Brooks this year. Chuba Hubbard and the Chuba train ain't coming off the tracks anytime soon. I have said that since March. I believe that he is the best player on their offense. Frankly, I think he became the face of their franchise this week. If you really think about it, I know the bar is very low, but if you really think about it, Derek Brown's out. JC hasn't been paid yet. Chuba Hubbard is the gift that keeps on giving for this team. And what I think is very cool about that is he did it in his third and fourth year. Running backs typically get launching off points where they start off really well because running back's the easiest position to kind of adapt to in the NFL.
Yeah.
But he got kind of the inverse of that. And so I think that's what's kind of cool here. It also takes pressure off of Jonathon Brooks because, frankly, you know who the key dog is, right? And so now I think with Brooks, you use him as a weapon. He's not just like a ground and pound sort of guy. He's not taking a ton of touches, but you utilize packages for him. And I think that's what they will do. I really think that 21 personnel, the 20 personnels are going to be somewhere where he can really eat. I think his receiving ability was understated at Texas. I think he has pretty good hands. I also think getting him out in space, they've been running a lot of wheel concepts and rub concepts. He can be a mismatch. At worst, he can be a decoy. And I think you will see him and Chuba Hubbard on the field quite a bit. I also think now with Miles Sanders reportedly escaping major injury, I think a look that you might see on third down is Brooks and Sanders kind of out there where it gives you two passing options at running back, but also if you want to mess with them a little bit, and we've seen Bryce Young take off a little bit, you can do all sorts of things there. So I think it's an interesting outlook, but I think he's going to be very limited off the jump.
Yeah, the Cuba thing is interesting to me about his progression. When he came in, he got an opportunity early on when Christian McCaffrey hurt his hamstring in that Thursday night game on the road against Houston. And then once McCaffrey came back, he was the guy. Then after that, the next season, it was more of a Deontay Foreman, Chuba Hubbard, as it was Deontay was more of the 1A than Chuba was more of the number 2 if he was a 1B at that. And then last year, he kind of took over midseason. And you go back to college, dude had a lot of carries, 585 carries. Most of those were in his sophomore year at Oklahoma State, where he was the best running back in college football. But the rest of the time, it wasn't like he had that many carries. So I do wonder if the fact that he didn't have that big a workload first couple years, and now he's kind of getting into that, if that helped preserve his body, because we see running backs around this time kind of start to decline, or he looks like he's just getting better, and that deal doesn't seem to be that bad. Now, it's more of a 2-year, $15 million deal when you look at it. People know here on this show, I say use them, abuse them, then lose them. You don't pay running backs. They don't help you win football games. McCaffrey was here, had great seasons, and the Panthers still couldn't win. And even when he didn't play, Panthers still couldn't win. So was Christian McCaffrey the reason they were winning or losing? No. Is he a great player? Absolutely. And I understood paying him at the time, but we see it didn't result into wins. And my hope is that Chuba Hubbard, he continues to stay healthy, he can help them, but still don't really think it's going to necessarily result into wins unless the quarterback play is much better, the receivers continue to progress, and the offensive line stays where it's been. That is really the key to me for this offense moving forward. But what do you think about their decision to give him that money and to invest in him as a guy that they want to be a cornerstone piece as they continue to grow whatever culture they're building here with Dave Canales?
So the luxury that good teams have is that they can look at position by position and say, hey, this is what we need, this is what we don't need. Teams that are rebuilding, teams that have faltered for a really long time, don't really get to pick and choose what they focus on or what they try to maximize. They're just looking for talented players. And I think when you look at Chuba Hubbard's work ethic, his progression, his ascension, his upside, his low floor, which is very key when you're paying somebody, he's got the type of style, and I think I said this to you in Munich, he's got the type of style that really doesn't deteriorate over age because he's what I call a possession running back. He can pick up 3 to 4 yards easy and very rarely lose it. Very comparable to Frank Gore in that sense, in that he's not going to lose you yardage. He's going to be able to take on the punishment because he's not overexerting himself. Then again, in Munich, you and I watched him run for 25 yards on 3 separate carries, right? So there is a little bit of juice there. But what I like about him is he's more technique, vision, work ethic based. And typically those guys have extremely high floors. like you said, it really reads out to being a 2-year deal if you're reading the contract properly. So you're looking at 25 and 26 is really his prime. And then, if he keeps doing what he's doing, then you think it through. But I think, use him and lose him kind of fits into guys where you really just drain them of their talent for 4 years. They really didn't get to do that with Chuba Hubbard. He was really a guy that didn't really take on anything for the first 2 years that he was there, and he didn't really do a ton in college either, like you said. So I think you have to weigh that. He's making the 9th highest APY. That's going to look even better when a couple of other guys get paid. I think he's just if you want to go beyond the position, sorry, I'm rambling a little bit, but
go ahead.
If you want to go beyond the position, he is the type that any team really would want. He's out there on the jugs machines 40 minutes after practice, every training camp, every regular season practice. He's a guy that everybody respects. They see him put in the work. I was told by several teammates they didn't expect him to change it all with the contract extension. There are guys in the locker room who you say to yourself, well, maybe he'll be a little bit more of a diva, or maybe he'll push his weight somewhere, or whatever. Chuba doesn't change. I've never seen a player get a mid-season extension and go out and have a career-high game like he did. He's currently, he enters this week 3rd in the league in rushing yards. Chuba Hubbard, 3rd in the league in rushing yards, and it doesn't feel like he's calming down anytime soon. I just think, he's such a great story, and as journalists, we love, especially sports journalists, we love telling good stories. Chuba Hubbard, to me, is one of the best stories that you could cover in Carolina over the last 3 years. And I think while they don't necessarily, they don't win that game without him. They don't beat the Saints without him.
No, probably not.
I think your point is astute in long-term success over a season doesn't lead to wins, but I do think
their issue the last couple of years with having good backs, that's great. And I think there is value. There is value obviously in having a good running back, but they have been losing games because they have not had an offensive line that could protect, and they have not had good quarterback play. And the receivers last year could not get open. So it's all well and good to have what D'Onta Foreman and what Chuba Hubbard could do in 2022 and what Chuba did last year is doing this year and what we saw McCaffrey do when he was here healthy in Carolina in 19. But the quarterback play was bad and the offensive line was bad. Sure. So that was what held them back. And that's kind of my thing. It's okay, you can pay him, but if your quarterback's play is not good, your offensive line is not healthy and it's not good, it doesn't really matter what he's able to do, because it's not going to necessarily result into the kind of high level wins. But you're right. They don't win these last 2 games without the way that he played. I am very curious to see how this develops, because the dude's a stud. I mean, he's one of the top 3 running backs in the league right now from rushing yards. You look at rushing success rate, he's 4th among backs out of at least 125 carries. So top 5 back right now in the NFL this season, and you got a rookie that you invested a 2nd-round pick in. I'm very curious to see how that develops over the course of time, because if Chuba keeps playing this well, hell, I mean, do you really want to give Jonathon Brooks his carries? You're going to have to. You got to take some off of him. I know we talked about this because I said, run him into the ground at this point in time. Be like, well, you pay the guy, you want to preserve him. They have that ability with Jonathon Brooks coming back. So I'm very curious to see how that continues to develop here. You're right. Great story. I loved him at Oklahoma State when he got drafted. I really liked that draft pick. Now, Josh Klein was like, you're a guy who wants Christian McCaffrey to never come off the field, but why would you like it? It's because he's a good player, and we've seen it.
Yeah, get good players. That's literally all you have to do is get good players.
And it's worked out. McCaffrey's no longer here. He's having success. Also, fingers crossed, man. I really don't want that Achilles to pop, both of them. But yeah, good job for Chuba Hubbard. Congrats to him. I want to talk a little bit about the rookie class and kind of look at this defense before we get out of here. So let's take a quick pause one more time and come back here with Mike Kaye of the Charlotte Observer. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more. FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All All right, Mike. So we're always looking for something to put our hope in. At least fans are all the time. And I was telling a midpoint of the season, it's like this is not going to be a playoff team. But the way you can look at it is you got Trevor Wallace starting there at inside linebacker of Josie Jewell. Clearly, that's going to be the future. I don't think Shaq Thompson comes back. Hate the way his career ended in Carolina the last 2 years. You got Xavier Legette starting on offense at wide receiver. Jalen Coker, he has now progressed to where he's one of the starters, and I'm interested to see how those two roles develop with Adam Thielen coming into the fold when they play Kansas City next week. Got JT Sanders at tight end in a season where we've rarely seen Ian Thomas, which no one's going to weep about, of course, or Tommy Trimble. Like, he's been thrown into the fire, and we have seen him after a rough start get progressively better throughout the season, which is what you want to see. So right now, looking at this rookie draft class and some of the undrafted free agents, primarily, of course, Jalen Coker, you're starting to see that, okay, maybe Carolina has something. And someone sent me a graphic where looking at Coker, Legette, and Sanders, all three of those guys are in the top 10 among rookie pass catchers in the NFL. No other team has three. That has to make people feel good moving forward. Like, what do you think so far about this rookie class that Dan Morgan brought in and how they performed and how they developed throughout the season?
Well, I think it's universally a good thing, right? I think for Dan Morgan, it shows that the scouting process of the past and the decision-making of the past when it comes to the draft really were like not in his control, at least from a success standpoint. I think it's a good look there. I think it's a good look from his scouting department that they were able to identify Damani Richardson and Jalen Coker. I think,
yeah, there we go.
I think, it speaks to Dave Canales constantly talks about how they're a developmentally minded staff. And I didn't really see that early on, but now that you've got guys in there, it seems like guys are making progress. I'm a massive fan of the Trevor Wallace pick. He was the best young player on the field during training camp, and it wasn't close. I think from a wide receiver standpoint, a tight end standpoint, I think it speaks to the strength of having a head coach who was a wide receivers coach, an offensive coordinator who was a wide receivers coach, a Pro Bowl wide receiver who is now a wide receivers coach. They've done a really good job of developing pass catchers. On top of that, I think, there's still two guys that have to play, right? And I think I think internally they are very stoked about Brooks. Crumity was always going to be a developmental player. I think they're showing you that and how slow he's been ready to go for like a month. And so I think they feel good about where they're at. I mean, if you can nail 4 picks a draft, you're in really good shape.
And this is not an organization that has done that very often.
Correct. And I think, I think there are guys also developing who didn't develop previously, like Cade Mays, who's had 2 back-to-back really good games, who was part of the previous regime. I think when you look at the way that, yes, Bryce Young has not played particularly well. I think he's played better than he has last year in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
I saw a stat the other day that his first touchdown against zone coverage was to JT Sanders on Sunday. He had never thrown. 0 touchdowns, 9 interceptions for zone in his career. I think there's been some development in the secondary. I like what I've seen from Shaw Smith-Wade. He's still very much a work in progress, but he's tackling very well. I think Damani Richardson has played very well. I think, the outside linebacker position is kind of the only spot where you're not really seeing a ton of development. And, they brought in a bunch of veterans and even they have gotten better. So I think from my standpoint, they are kind of practicing what they preach. I think they're going to reward internal guys. I think Chuba Hubbard getting that contract was big for the locker room, and I think they'll continue to progress.
Yeah, I think recent years had not been a lot of guys you can point to be like, okay, that guy's going to be here in 4 or 5 years. That guy's going to be here. And I think 2020 draft class, when they went out there and got all 7 guys on the defensive side of the ball, like Derek Brown, you felt like he was going to be a cornerstone as long as that worked out. It has absolutely worked out. Etorgos Matos, that was a hope there. And after the way he played last year, it looked like that could be a guy somebody might bring back. And I know they wanted to. It didn't work out. And then Jeremy Chin, certainly that rookie year looked like he was going to be a guy who's going to be here long term and just did not fit the scheme last year, had some injuries, and now he's up in Washington. But this is really the first class, I think, since then where you look at all these guys, you think, okay, like clearly Legette, is going to have a role. I don't know if he's going to end up being that number one guy at the end of the day. We'll see, but he's going to clearly have a role here in Carolina. Brooks, got to give him some time, but that probably is going to work out. Trevin Wallace as well. Charles Smith-Way getting some opportunities. I think it's actually kind of nice. He's got to take a step back with Dane Jackson back and how they're having that, how they employed or deployed that secondary on Sunday with those five. Like, you can see where these guys could actually be the future in Carolina, which has not been kind of the case over the last couple of years. I'm curious because that the Cade May situation and Brady Christensen as well. Like, Ike Ekwonu, I would guess, is going to come back after the bye week at left tackle. I mean, Brady has played well at center. I mean, Cade held his own against Dexter Lawrence on Sunday and the last two games. Is it going to be Brady again? Do you think it's going to be Cade? Like, how do you think they work that out?
No, it's going to be when Icky comes back, Brady's their center.
Okay.
Here's the thing.
And like, I'm very interested too, because like, this is a guy who's going in. Like, they drafted him. They said from the beginning he could play every position on the offensive line. Sure. All-American left tackle at BYU, sat in there at left guard, got hurt last year, had to take a step back, has come in and has played well, and is going to be a free agent upcoming. And they still, like, they have questions on the offensive line after this year as far as like what to do with Moten, what they're going to do at center, and then with Icky, the fifth-year option. So I'm just kind of, is this like an opportunity maybe for them to keep Brady, or do they maybe want to go back to Corbett? He only got to play 5 games. Just all these things going through my head about just the offensive line right now.
I think the answer is pretty simple. You pay Brady Christensen. Here's the reason why. Because if you're going to pay him as your starting center, you also know that he can start at left tackle. You also know that he can start at left guard. You know he can start at right guard. You're pretty sure he can start at right tackle. So no matter what, he's a starter. You're paying him to be a starter.
Okay.
He knows the offense. I think he fits really well into what they try to do from a spatial standpoint. He's the most athletic guy on that line outside of maybe Robert Hunt. I think, what's interesting is I criticize them for signing 2 guards as opposed to a guard and a center. I mean, I remember you and I talking about it a ton. And because there was no backstop for Icky. If Icky struggled at left tackle, where are you going to put him? Well, Damian Lewis has a background in playing center. So that gives them a little bit of flexibility. You do have Cade Mays. Let's say hypothetically you cut Taylor Moten. Do you put Brady Christensen at right tackle and then Cade Mays is the starting center so you can save a buck? Do you move Damian Lewis to center and have Icky play left guard and Brady play left tackle? Like, you have a bunch of options. I actually think, it's comparable to the Eagles where like they probably have 7 starting offensive linemen. This team has probably 6.5 starting caliber offensive linemen. Yeah. I think it's going to be really tough to pay Brady or Austin Corbett, given the amount of knee injuries he has had.
Yeah, I mean, the last 2 years is kind of hard sell, especially at his age too.
Well, and obviously this is not what he's coming back from is not a knee injury, but I do think like at some point you're like, are you buying a 20, a 2002 Volkswagen Jetta like to play center like that? You've got to ask yourself like, man, he's had some wear and tear. And look, I think negotiating wise, they'll look into it because they like him as a leader. They like him as a player. And if he's affordable, go for it. But I do think there's a possibility they could re-sign them both. And if you say, hey, I want to move on from Moten, or I think Icky is probably better fit for guard, then you have an opportunity to re-sign them both. But I think they have a good problem to have going into this offseason where they have 3 separate guys who have started at center that didn't have a ton of center experience, and they've all played well. And that is a testament to their 3-man weave offensive line coach situation.
Yeah, I felt like going into the year they were better equipped this season to actually be able to withstand the injuries. And looking at it, Robert Hunt's the only guy that's played every game, and It's not falling apart. You told me before the season, I felt like, okay, I feel pretty good about that, but actually being able to see it all stick together is good. Okay, I guess last question here. Icky, going to come back. We've seen him play 8 games so far this year. 5th-year option. I think it's trending towards exercise or trending towards nah.
I think it depends on what they do with Christensen. I think
so. This is a March question to answer more so.
Yeah, I think it's a March. You'll know the answer to May in March. I think. Okay. Look, I know he's gotten a lot of flack. I think he's been much improved this year. But low bar from last year.
I mean, well, people are just looking just for one thing to complain because they got
Correct.
their whole mindset is he's got to play guard, even though they just paid 2 guards. But you did bring up a good point about how they could be flexible there.
Yeah, I mean, I think they feel good about him. When I was scouting him when he was in college, I compared him to Jason Peters from an upside standpoint. I don't think he's Jason Peters, but if you look at the way that he leverages and, the way he uses his body as a run blocker, I think there's a lot of untapped potential there. The problem that they ran into last year is he kind of reverted to a lot of the habits that he had at NC State. And I know that that was something that they needed to work on this year. And so I think he's cleared some of that. I think he's got a lot more confidence this year. I think playing next to a much better left guard helps. Because remember last year it was like a revolving door next to him. And so I think if you have a constant presence, and I think Damian Lewis is a very smart player, it kind of helps you navigate those waters. And I think Icky has had his hiccups, but I do think, and you could argue he's the worst player in the starting lineup, but I think the worst player in the starting lineup this year is exponentially better than the worst player on the offensive line last year, given everything that happened. They do have that backstop in Josh Nyman, and I think that's really interesting. The guy that I'm really interested to see what his situation is Taylor Moton. And Taylor Moton is part of that answer, right? To the Icky question. And I mean, right now, I would not pick up the 5th-year option. I'd make him want to earn it. I'd make him, I still believe in him as a left tackle, but I also think there is some incentive. Like, he hasn't shown the upside that Jaycee showed, even just playing in 22 games.
No, you're right.
And I think, like, Icky's not somebody that you need to leverage with the 5th-year option. I think he's a guy who's been kind of a league average left tackle. You're not nervous if you lose him, but you also, if you want to retain him, it's okay to negotiate now. I'm a big believer in getting in front of the 5th-year option, which is what they did with Derek Brown. It's probably what they're going to do with Jaycee Horn, who, by the way, I feel like we're not talking about him enough. Jaycee Horn is one of the best tackling cornerbacks in the league. So to say that when he has gotten a reputation of being somewhat, soft because of the injury status, he's been durable this year. I think if there was a guy that you were like, the staff has reached culturally and developmentally from the previous regime, I think Jaycee Horn is the most improved player on this team, just from a durability and a toughness standpoint. He worked out a lot more in the offseason. He looks bigger. He looks really confident. There's a swagger back there. I think for a little while, he was kind of fighting against the swagger because he wanted to prove it. But I've been extremely impressed by his leadership, his buy-in to this program. Jaycee Horn, when healthy, is a top 5 corner. There's no debate for me.
I think we've known that. The problem is he's not been able to show it. Like we out the gates, like, this guy is a hell of a player. Then he breaks his foot. Then he comes back in 22, plays well, has the friendly fire. He has the rib injury as well. And then, like, last year, it just sucks that he has not been able to play. But now you're finally getting to see, like, who he really is. And I hope the rest of the league is getting an opportunity. And I don't know, maybe next Sunday against Kansas City, I don't know who's going to be calling the game. They're going to certainly have a decent crew out here in Charlotte.
Sure.
That the NFL can see, that Horn guy, number 8, is pretty damn good, huh? So be curious to see. Like, they got to pay him. Icky, we'll see. But the offensive line in the offseason, it was a big conversation this past offseason. Going to be another big one this upcoming offseason, as they got a couple of pieces they could move around and figure out what they're going to do. Mike, appreciate you as always. Congratulations on your new car, as I've heard that you got the other day. And also hope that you're well rested and recovered from our long trip to Munich. I have not gotten back yet. I'm still
you were being very presumptuous. I am exhausted. I think I slept 12 hours total. But I don't
have kids, so I guess that probably is what's may be a hang up for you, getting the rest back.
Yeah, try negotiating a car when you've got to work around nap time and picking up kids from school. Yeah, it's been I hit the ground running here once I got back to the States.
Yeah, well, haven't we all? But appreciate you as always, man. Follow me on Twitter at Mike_E_KAYE. If you're over on Blue Sky and Threads, Mike Kaye Football. And of course, subscribe to your local paper, the Charlotte Observer. Got a great deal going on right now. Can get the next 2 months of coverage for the Panthers in the regular season basically free. So go out there, do that. Check out Mike's work, Alex's work, Scott, and everybody else over there at the Charlotte Observer. Mike, appreciate you as always, man.
Thanks, JC.
That's going to wrap up this edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, hosted by yours truly, Julian Council. Again, y'all subscribe, follow the show for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. And be sure to follow me, Julian Council, on Twitter at Julian Council. Or I'm back again on Wednesday answering your weekly Wednesday mailbag questions. All you got to do is either at me or DM me to get those questions in for Wednesday's show. But in the meantime, be safe, be happy, be whole as always, and forever keep pounding. I'll be back with you on Tuesday, breaking down what Dave Canales had to say. Will we know who the quarterback will be? We'll talk about that tomorrow on Locked On Panthers.